It's a pleasure to be here in this conference. First of all, I think congratulations are in place for Q2 for celebrating their anniversary, and of course for also organizing a well-attended event like this conference. I wanted to start by sharing that I had my own share of an agility test when I got involved in this conference because I was supposed to be speaking on day one. When Sarah asked me to join this conference, she asked me to choose what day I wanted, and I chose day one. So as I was in the midst of my preparation for topic day one, I suddenly realized that I had a previous engagement. So I had to quickly message Sarah and say, I'm sorry, I can't make it on day one. So I got transferred on day two. And then I started preparing for day two topic. And then a few days later, I got a request that somebody from day three wanted to have a switch. And I acceded to the request because, I was free on day three. So I ended up in day three, okay? So, and I'm glad I ended up in day three because I think the topic for day three is really the closest to my heart. It made me realize, the topic made me realize that all these years of my professional life has truly been devoted to helping organizations become better through a journey. And this is precisely what I want to talk about with you this morning. Talking about the journey, I remember way back, when I started my career, I used several organization development framework. I started with management by objectives and so many, the 7S. And now in the last 15 years, I find myself using a framework called Investors in People, which is an international good practice standard as I help organizations make transitions from where they are to where they want to be. And I'm glad that in this case, Q2 is one of those accredited organizations on the platinum level, the highest level award for investors in people. I wanted to start my conversation with you by trying to share my slide now, okay? My next slide. By this statement, I wanted to start with this statement as a context because I think this is truly the best way of describing the kind of environment we live in today. Well, I heard the word VUCA from Hanky. I think that's another, acronym that we've been using all these years. But probably the good question to ask here is this: what has changed with change? Because we've been talking about change from way back. I remember in 30 years ago, we've been talking about change. So what has really happened with change? I think there are three things that really happened with change. The first one is it has become faster. I think speed is the name of the game today. And change has become even more radical. And change, to be truly effective, needs to be total. I think these are the three things that has really happened that made the environment so disruptive, so volatile. There's a lot of crises, As a matter of fact, talking about the pandemic, and we've been talking about the pandemic for all these months, I really think that even if it's bad, there's certain things that's good that happened as a result of the pandemic. And I'd like to say that the pandemic is a great teacher. It has taught us many things, really. It has taught us, first of all, that work from home can work, that it is possible to work from home. As a matter of fact, right now in our own organization, I've never felt so connected with my colleagues, even internationally, as a result of the pandemic because of virtual meetings. So work from home can work, and I'm sure this will become a permanent fixture as we move into the next normal. The other thing that we found that this pandemic taught us is it taught us how to be compassionate. I've seen a lot of organizations who have really exercised compassion as they try to alleviate the plight of the employees, understand the employees during lockdowns and things like that by continuing with their salaries and things. I think there's a lot of outpouring of compassion that has been shown as a result of this pandemic. We have learned how to value our health and our relationships because knowing pretty well we might just lose them anytime. But to me, what stands out as the best learning as a result of this pandemic is the value of agility. I think this is where a lot of us really failed, even countries, even companies. I think this big one, the big disruption, which we call COVID-19, has really caught us by surprise. And it has made agility a valuable core competency as far as moving forward into the future is concerned. That's why now we say, if you want your organization to last, you will have to build an organization that is built to change. That is the only organization that can survive a highly disruptive environment. Okay, moving forward, I think during this time, as I speak with many business people, they are very busy trying to formulate what they call business recovery plans or business continuity plans. And they get so focused on the strategy portion of the plan. They say, how do we change our business model? How do we pursue new products? How do we improve our processes? How do we introduce new technology so that we can even get out of this pandemic even stronger than before the pandemic? But what I've noticed is something that's grossly missing in this plan is the word culture. I think it's about time we take culture more seriously, because if you try to take a look at culture, it has many benefits really. Culture is our brand, in effect. You build the culture to build your brand. Culture is responsible for implementation ability. If you don't have the right culture, even if you have the best strategies, it does not get implemented without the right appropriate culture. And more importantly, as we speak of building cultures, building it increases our intangible value. There's a lot of valuation now in terms of intangible values. Not everything that you see is what's valuable. When you speak about things like quality of leadership, the ability to innovate, the ability to raise the engagement levels of employees are truly intangible value that increases the market valuation of firms. And they're all springing from culture. So culture change should somehow figure in a lot of this business recovery or business continuity plans. Speaking about culture, I think when we say culture change, we're not just referring to incremental change anymore. I think incremental change is too slow. I think it has to be transformational. And that word, when we use the word transformation, it means we're not just changing skill sets. More importantly, we're changing mindsets. I think that is the key to transformation. So mindsets that follows skill sets. That's the only way to sustain the changes that we introduce into our organizations. The leaders perform a critical role. And we've been talking about leadership for the last 2 days. The role, we've talked about servant leadership, we've talked about inspiring leadership, whatever term, or leaders with a heart, whatever kind of leadership brand we put there, I think it all boils down to one thing. Leaders must be able to bring out the best in people, because it is during these times that we need everyone's help to be able to make the transformation work. Because as we take a look at an uncertain future, there's a lot of uncertainty. There will be so many problems that will be coming our way where we don't have any solutions, because we cannot rely on the past solutions, because the past solutions work for a different environment. Past solutions will not work in a different future. That's why we need the collective intelligence of everyone, and leadership can bring that into the fore so that we can move forward, create new solutions as we meet new problems along the way. It's very similar as a symbol of what's happening to us in the pandemic. COVID-19 is a classic example of an issue that we grapple with each day, and we continue to learn about it each day. And unless we get together as a medical community, we will not be able to beat this disease, this virus. So moving forward, I think what's important is I want to present to you, and this is going to be my main message for this presentation, what I call the 6 pathways to agility. So if you truly want to be an agile organization, probably this is the one slide that you can refer to. I'd like to say, first of all, that this is now the way we communicate with our clients, in investors in people, as a way of understanding the standard. The standard is too technical to understand. So this is now our way of communicating, because business leaders need to have a clear view of what's the destination of the journey. And if you take a look at this, the destination is very clear. That's the right side. And where we're mostly coming from is from the left side. And that makes a good journey. It has to have a clear destination. The left side, take a look at the left side. If you are an organization who is just for profit only, is very controlling, hierarchical, and keeps secret a lot of things, and you want to predict and control, I don't think you will really last long in a highly disruptive environment moving forward. So I think there must be a conscious effort, an intent to move towards the right. And moving towards the right, this is not an either or proposition. Moving to the right means, like in the case of profit and purpose, you have to be both when you move to the right. Mean to say, you have to have both purpose and profit. Now, some of you might think, and this is where, but they don't mix together. Let's talk about that a little later. Because one of the things that's happening now in a highly complex environment is there's a lot of paradox that we need to grapple with, sometimes seemingly conflicting. When we meld them together, they give us a deeper wisdom. And that is what we need to find out moving forward into a more uncertain and disruptive future. So let's unpack each of these pathways. Let's try to understand what each of these pathways mean. Okay. First one is a movement from profit to purpose, and this is the focus. I think this is simply saying to us, the main message that I want to say here is simply, we need to have the proper perspective for profit. I think we need to have the perspective that is similar to an analogy of profit to air. We say we need air to survive, but it is not the point of life. That is not what life is all about, but we need it to survive. I think that is the kind of perspective we need to have for profit. I remember when I was young, I wanted to be athletic. And one of those things that I did was get into tennis, okay? And I wanted to be a competitive tennis player. So I had several weeks of training. And every time, and I had a coach, at one time I had a coach, and the coach, when I was playing, noticed that every time I played and I lost, I was always looking at the scoreboard, okay? So, and then all of a sudden, I get this frequent advice coming from the coach saying, Gerry, eyes on the ball. Eyes on the ball. And true enough, when I started really looking and focusing on the ball, the score took care of itself. I think this is the same analogy we need to use when we talk about profit or purpose. The ball is purpose. The profit comes as a result of focusing on that, because profit is not the ball. Let's move forward and take a look at some of the shifts that we see happening here. There's a shift, there's a growing shift from focusing on shareholders' needs to the needs of overall stakeholders. Okay, and when we speak of stakeholders, we're really referring to all these stakeholders. It is as if now what we're beginning to realize the value of an ecosystem, that if you want to truly have a successful business, you cannot just take care of one stakeholder. It has to be the set of stakeholders. Everyone plays a vital role in making a business successful. So if you try to satisfy the need of one, like shareholders, at the expense of others, then we will get into trouble. We might not, we might not eventually be there for the long haul. So a key word to understand here is the word sustainability. And sustainability is not just a climate change term. It is a lot broader than that. It means, how can I build a business that can survive for a long period of time? Who does not want to build something that will survive over a long period of time? And this is where stakeholders becomes very important. Another story associated with this is something I picked up with Stephen Covey way back, during the 7 Habits days, when it was very popular. I'm sure Rhea knows about that. The story about the goose that laid the golden eggs. Remember that story? This old farmer who happened to have this goose that lays one golden egg each day. After several months, got so greedy and impatient, so he decided to kill the goose so that he can get all the golden eggs. Only to find out when he cut the goose into half, there were no golden eggs. It's a similar lesson here. If we try to be greedy and want to have short-term returns, we might be doing that by compromising our future. And that does not make good business sense, definitely. So taking care of stakeholders is the goose, because that is what's going to make our business sustain for a long period of time. Now, purpose. Let's take a little bit more about this purpose. I like the sharing of Hanky earlier about his own personal transformation, because he was saying that as a result of the pandemic, he found his purpose. I think that's one of the other lessons, probably one of the great things that has happened as a result of the pandemic. People were asked to do a self-reflection and ask some basic questions like, why am I here? What am I, what's my life all about? And I think that kind of reflection should not only happen on a personal level, it should happen even on a corporate level. And this is the simplest definition of what purpose is. It's the reason for existence beyond just making money. So it is something that, that's the point of life. What is the point of life beyond just making money? Because if you take a look at it, money is simply, or profit is simply the reward for doing something good. Really, in effect, that is what the perspective should be. So, but there's so many benefits to purpose. Like, purpose inspires, purpose unites, purpose energizes, isn't it? So if you were to compare, what is more inspiring, a number or a purpose? Oh, definitely, I'd go for purpose. Numbers only inspire very few, okay? So, but purpose has a universal impact in terms of, inspiring a larger group of people. And purpose always serves. It can never be purpose to serve yourself. It can never be self-centered. Purpose is always about others. Now, talking about purpose, I'd like to talk about 2 types of purpose. One I call basic purpose. And the basic purpose says, if we truly want to take care of the shareholder needs, and these where profits are, we need to take care of customers, suppliers, and employees. It's a very basic business tenet. Because if you're not doing something good for these others, I don't think the profits will follow. Because you can have a philosophy that says, oh, never mind what the customers, the suppliers, and the employees needs. I just want to maximize profitability for the shareholders. Where will that business go? That business will not go very far, definitely. because it is not serving a basic purpose. Remember, businesses are built to serve a purpose, to fulfill a human need. And unless that is done well, we don't deserve profits. Profits will not come if you're not doing something good. So the concept of doing good and doing well are not really opposites. They really need to go together. And when I spoke about the tennis game that I had, the ball is purpose and profit is the result of that. It's a byproduct. Okay. As they say, okay, moving forward, like for instance, I'll give you an example. One of the stories I picked up along the way, even in the area of suppliers, was when I was studying entrepreneurs. I studied the life of Mr. Toyoda, the one who organized Toyota. And I noticed that he had this practice of organizing very lavish dinners for all the suppliers of Toyota. And what was surprising about this dinner affairs was he was the one himself serving the food. He was the one serving the food to all his suppliers as his gesture of gratitude for doing business with Toyota. That is Mr. Toyoda's way of, exhibiting his goodwill to the suppliers. Customers, we need to really satisfy customers to stay in business, isn't it? We cannot shortcut the quality of the service that we provide customers. Employees, take a look at employees. There are some companies who focus on employees first, like Southwest Airlines would say employees first. They try to create a great place to work, and there are more and more studies that we're saying exclusively that if you create a great place to work, it will have an impact on productivity. Okay, all of this is part of basic purpose. Now, you might ask, do we need to get into a higher purpose? Is there a business case for going for higher purpose when we get concerned about society and environment? Do you think, probably I'd like to address that by asking a question. Do you think a business will make money if half of the cities of the coastal cities are underwater, for instance, and a majority of the people are suffering from poverty because they don't even earn a living wage? Do you think in that kind of an atmosphere a business can thrive? I think it's not possible, because the misery of one sector eventually becomes the misery of everyone. We're so interconnected, and this pandemic has shown us how interconnected we all are. We are in one planet, one family. We're so interconnected. That's why we can't say we don't mind what happens to society or to the environment. I think businesses will have to come in and do their part. This is too tough for just governments or NGOs. Businesses will have to play their part. They can be a force for the greater good as well. And you know what? What is interesting? Organizations based on research that even go for the greater purpose, based on research, become even more profitable than organizations that are just profit-oriented. Why? Because they become so endearing to everyone. Everyone wants to do business with them. People want to work for them. They attract a lot of good in the process. So moving forward, where do we find purpose? Oh, we can find them in our mission statements, or our value statements, or even our CSR programs, or even KPIs, So these are some of the areas that we can say, how do we investigate whether the organization has true purpose? The journey for purpose looks something like this. This is one just type of a journey. Probably the biggest, and this is probably where the biggest challenge comes in, is how do you change the mindset of many businessmen, especially owners of businesses, okay, who only wants profits. Study the business case for purpose-driven organizations. I think you need to involve even the shareholders in this study. Let's take a look at why, for instance, the more purpose-driven the organization, the more profitable they become, even in the long term. Okay. And then once we have convinced them and we change the mindset, then probably we can craft an inspiring purpose statement similar to inspiring purpose statements by some organizations. Like a Starbucks would say, they don't count too much the number of coffee they sell. They say their purpose statement at one time, of course this has changed through time, is building a community where people are respected and dignified. Can you imagine if that's the kind of messaging that Starbucks says, if you're joining us, you're joining towards this just cause. This is what we're all about. This is who we are. And sometimes when we combine purpose with numbers, profits, the numbers become meaningful because it's related to a purpose rather than a standalone number, which does not mean much anything. You can craft that, and then you can communicate that, make your leaders communicate that through speeches, through conversations, and you can even develop a KPI for it. If you truly believe in that purpose, you want to measure how you're succeeding in that purpose, then you can develop a KPI. Let's go to the next pathway. The next pathway is leadership, and we've talked a lot about this in the last 2 days. To me, it's simply the shift from being a controlling leader to an empowering leader. Okay, and this is probably the concept that we need to understand, the difference between the two. I got my education of the differentiation between the two many years back when I was attending an international conference, and I happened to have a chat with a young delegatee, and we had this exchange. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, he says, Mr. Plana, he says, I want to be led and not managed. And then that answer, that kind of statement intrigued me. So I probed into the question. I said, what exactly do you mean? And he continued by saying that because I know the difference, he says, because if I am managed, I feel like an object. I can feel it. Okay. When I'm led, I feel like a human being. And truly enough, when we speak about these terms, management is for things. And we've known this for many years. We manage our cash, and we manage our facilities, but leadership is really for people. And this is where inspiration comes in. And that's the reason why sometimes we have so many problems in some organizations. It's because organizations are overmanaged and underled. And we need to create that balance so that people can feel being human beings. So, moving forward, when we say empowered people, we're really looking at decision making is very important here, because if you want people to be in control and responsible for their own situation, I think decision making, the ability to make decisions, becomes very, very important. Trust is important for empowerment. If control is about fear, empowering leaders is about trust. Speaking of trust, I think one of our experiences here in this pandemic was we struggled for a while when we started working from home, and there was this big discussion about how do we know people are working in their homes? How do we know they're giving in 8 hours of work? There was a lot of debate along this area. And whenever I engage in that conversation, I say, the game has changed. I think we need to trust people and just talk deliverables, because that is what is important anyway. Okay? What is the outcome that you want from people? So again, we've got so stuck in these activities and watching people. Probably this is the manual work mentality, But when you go into knowledge work, that's an entirely different ball game. And a lot of this knowledge work can be done at home or anywhere, as far as knowledge work is concerned. So the journey in this pathway can simply look something like this. First, let's make a distinction between management and leadership. I think that needs to be done. And then once that is differentiated, we build the leadership skills, And coaching is a powerful leadership skill because we really respect people, we listen to people, we make people think, we grow people, and then we delegate. That's where the decision making comes. And then we build a culture that encourages self-direction rather than being controlled. Now, this can be threatening for some managers, because what this implies is they need to shift their roles into more of coaches and mentors and guides rather than the one who is in control. Because really, take a look at it. Controlling is slow. Empowering is fast, because we can be more agile if we have empowered our workforce to be able to deliver their tasks without waiting for orders or instructions from above. Third pathway is the organization. Okay, and this is the shift from hierarchy to networks. Again, take a look at this. This is not going to stand a chance in a highly disruptive environment. This was good for another time. Let's face it. This was good during stable times, but not during this time. Flexibility is the name of the game. And when we say flexibility, we need to get out of that vertical orientation of let's just work within our own functions and let's try to move into teams. So we need to be very creative in making teams work, cross-functional teams, multi-level teams, making customers as part of the team, making suppliers part of the team, virtual teams, even the hybrid discussion now of how many will be working from home and working in the office as we move into the next normal is part of the flexibility we need. We need to transcend and drop all those bureaucracies, because otherwise, they're going to drag us in terms of pivoting whenever we need to do that. And that is what networks is all about. The journey can look something like this. Study the advantages of horizontal management. Take a look. I use the word horizontal management because traditional organizations, a lot of vertical management. This is the interesting thing about our organizations. We organize ourselves vertically, but the real work really gets done horizontally. And that's why we need to really pay attention, serious attention to horizontal management. Let's have teams. Let's develop team objectives. A lot of our performance management systems are all individual objectives. No, we need to develop team objectives. We need people to collaborate. We need people to bring themselves together during these times. It's not an individual work demand. And then develop the culture of flexible working. Okay, let's go to the fourth area. The fourth area is about communication, and the shift is from privacy. We keep a lot of secrets to transparency. Okay, and this is in the area of communication. Something to talk about, given formal and informal communication, is the idea of grapevine. Do you know that during crisis times, the grapevine is very active? This is the informal communication. That's why if you're kind of slow in the formal side, and there's a lot of questions that are raised during crisis or during times of uncertainty, it's the grapevine that fills in the gap. Okay, so to manage communication, we need to be very quick on the formal side so that we can answer a lot of these questions that arise during crisis times, so that the grapevine does not take over. It says here you can't have secrets and have a high trust organization. Transparency is always related or correlated with building trust. Okay, psychological safety. I don't know if you're familiar with this term, but this was invented by a certain Harvard professor, and it simply means freedom to speak up without fear. Part of communication. But this is the problem in communication, the upward, going upward communication is more problematic. There's a lot of downward communication. But getting up, is something else. I remember I was in one company, and I was observing a meeting that was attended by a multi-level membership. There were senior managers, there were middle managers, there were first-line supervisors, and there were staff level. Guess what I observed? I observed that the most talkative people were the senior managers. The second most talkative people were the middle managers. The first line supervisors hardly spoke, and definitely the staff people never spoke. So from that simple observation, I said, my God, there is a hierarchy of airtime. Okay. So the way, the airtime also has a hierarchy depending on your level in the organization. So if you want to truly unleash this freedom, I think we need to be very purposive in trying to create an environment where people are free to speak up. Because if we can't get the bottoms up communication flowing, I think we'll be missing a lot of cues that will make us pivot. They might have certain critical information they have on hand that can be very critical to what we need to do as a business. The journey can look something like this. Get everyone on board in terms of what's the value of being transparent. And then the second circle is about, what do we need to share to people? Information like, why do we make certain business decisions? What is our real financial condition? I think being open and sharing, being transparent with this will always pay huge dividends. And then the bottoms up approach, how do we build a culture of freedom to speak and then develop a culture of transparency? Learning. The learning pathway is about being present-oriented and future-oriented. And it talks about learning as the only competitive advantage in this kind of environment. We talk of learning agility. Now learning has been transformed into what is being popularized these days are learning bites, micro-learning, learning on the fly, just-in-time learning. It's all about those, things that we just need and bits and pieces. We don't want to get overwhelmed. We want to be direct to the point. This is the kind of learning that we need as we move into a very, uncertain future. And one thing important here in this pathway is we need to take a look at tomorrow because it takes time to build skills. So when you say, what will be the skills of tomorrow that we need to start building today? Especially as we take a look at one of the biggest threats we have now is the AI and the robotics, especially as there's going to be a major shift in jobs, what will be taken over by the machines and what will be left for people, the human work. I think we really need to plan for that, for upskilling and reskilling so that we're able to really prepare our capabilities moving forward into the future. Build on strengths is one of those important things that we need to do now because the road from strength to winning is shorter than from weakness to winning. This is the shorter route to take to be able to build winning organizations. The journey can look something like this. Identify your future skills capabilities, include that in your planning process, establish your learning infrastructure, especially now with a lot of virtual, you need to do that and capitalize on that as well. Learning from experience is very critical, okay? And mistakes, I think that should not be discounted, and creating a learning culture. Performance, this is the last pathway. The shift is from a need to predict and control things, like we set 1 year goals. I think we need to rethink that. We probably need more shorter goals that are changeable, and we need to be quick in sensing and responding. This is a good, good statement that says, let's be quick enough to be able to pivot. And that requires us to have a sensing and responding cycle. It all starts with gathering information, really. I think we do this every time we do strategic planning. We have this external scan. But I think nowadays, the external scan should be on a daily basis. Okay? It should not be a one-off event anymore. As a matter of fact, I know of one organization in the past who trained all their employees to be data gatherers. And so that they can analyze the impact of what they gather in the environment in terms of, is this going to have a positive effect on our business or a negative effect on business? In short, everyone, we need to strategize every day. It's no longer an event, because of what's happening, all the changes that's happening around. We need to be very good in sensing. And then we analyze the data, of course, we develop the insights, and we go for a quick action. This is the sense and response cycle. You know, taking a look at the pandemic again, take a look at our history. The moment we heard of the Wuhan lockdown on January 23, it took most of the world, most, not all, almost 2 months before they did their own lockdowns. That's how slow a lot of nations were, and that's the reason why we're in this state now. So the idea of sensing and respond on the business level is we should be quick to connect to the environment so that when we sense something and we need to pivot and pivot quickly, we need to do that. And when we pivot, we might not have the perfect solution. That's why we need to be experimental in orientation. We try this out, have prototypes, we evaluate what happens, and then we adjust and we course correct as we go along. I think this is the way to move forward in a highly disruptive environment. The journey can look something like this. We set up an environment where we have a scanning mechanism, every day, if possible, establish and analyzing the data and insighting from the data. And we have a quick execution, and we create an agile organization. Okay, just before I close, I just wanted to say as part of the journey that these are two words that are very important in any journey. We need to know how to celebrate as leaders, and we need to be good at storytelling. Because celebrating, especially milestones, is important. And take a look at the value of stories. Stories, because the climb to the top, if we were to put an analogy into our journey, is going to be difficult. And we need continued encouragement to continue that journey. And that's the reason why when we talk of stories, there's something magical about stories that encourage people to continue the journey, especially in times of great challenge and turmoil. Stories speak to both reason and emotion. That's the power of stories. That's why, stories can make people move, can move people. And stories are essential ways of conveying that we're making progress. The beauty about story is we put a human face to what success looks like. And we need to do that as frequently as we can so that people get encouraged to continue despite the difficulty of the journey. Okay. Now, in summary, this is the kind of an agile organization we want to build that can probably has a bigger chance of surviving in a highly disruptive environment. You start with purpose as your base because that is the source of energy. That is where you energize people. You empower through your leadership, and this is where you get the individual autonomy flowing. Networks gives you the flexibility to work. Transparency builds trust. The future, you're able to plan for the future ahead of time. You have the time, you build the capability moving to the future. And because of this 5, you're able to, and with your good sensing mechanism, you're able to pivot quickly if it is necessary. I'd like to close by saying that the secret to organizational success is not predicting the future. It is in building an organization that can thrive in a future that cannot be predicted. I'd like to part with a little story I picked up along the way during my years of helping organizations. There's this story about a little boy, this naughty little boy in one town, in a barrio, who wanted to test the wisdom of one of their old members of the community. So what this little boy did was he got a little bird, like a Maya bird, into his hand. He approached this old man, put his hand behind his back, and asked the old man a question to test his wisdom. He asked the old man, "Old man, I have a bird in my hand at my back. I want you to guess, is it alive or dead?" And the little boy was just thinking on, to himself and saying, if the old man says it's dead, I will just make it fly. And but if he says alive, I will just tweak its neck a little and I will present him with a dead bird. And after a few minutes of a few seconds of silence, the old man said, "You know what, little boy? The answer to your question lies in your hands." I hope I've given you enough ideas to inspire you to start or even improve your own journeys. Because in the end, the question to whether your organization will thrive in this environment is now in your hands. Thank you very much.